Hi everyone, my name's Lamar and I welcome you to the first of a series of videos that I'm now going to do, where I'm going to share with you some of the insights and learnings that I've had as a photographer and give you guys a chance to sort of go behind the scenes in terms of some of the things that I do and I make. It's a new idea I've had with the current pandemic lockdown. I figured it would be a good idea to see if there are new ways that I could sort of share the work that I do with you guys and sort of find a way to sort of engage in what I do. So this is the first of a series of ideas. If you've got any sort of feedback, then feel free to sort of leave any comments or email me on the website, which I've got here, pictured by lamar.co.uk. I've got a mailing list as well you can join, so you can find out more about some of the things that I do and make on the way. So to begin with, a quick update as to how am I doing in this time of lockdown, these strange and sort of uncertain times. Well, in some ways, it's been very useful. It's been very useful to be able to take a step back from what I was doing, because in the 6 months or so before all of this came about, I realised I found myself being very, very sort of busy. So very, very busy. Thankfully, good news with doing a lot of interesting work and a lot of interesting assignments. Unfortunately, a lot of which has had to stop because of the pandemic, with a lot of my work being, a lot of the client work that I have done has been events based. So that's had to come to a stop, but I am in a fortunate position. I've got some very helpful people. I've got number of people that give me a lot of help and a lot of support in terms, and I'm pretty sure that once we sort of get out of lockdown and when the economy starts to pick up again, I'm pretty sure there'll be people that will need me to tell the stories of their business, tell the stories of their people. So I think it will come back, but it may not come back very quickly. But as I say, I'm fairly sure of what I do. So in the meantime, I've decided to see if there are sort of new things that I could do to sort of keep myself busy and to keep you guys going as well with stuff. So I thought it would be a great time to sort of try a few new ideas. And one thing that I can do, I am looking at, is offering a colouring book based around some of the cityscape work that I've been doing in Nottingham, featuring a series of landmarks and cityscapes, which obviously a lot of us hasn't been able to go out and see because of the lockdown, with everything sort of closed down. So if you're interested in more about that, then put your name and your email address in my mailing list. And I'll be able to send you the details once I sort of work through things more often than that. So today what I wanted to my first sort of idea I wanted to talk to you is share with you a selection of photographs I've been making while essentially in quarantine. And for many of us, we've been locked away in our homes, unable to perhaps travel or visit a lot of the places that we do. Well, we have been able to sort of make some of the photographs that we do. But what I found is that the whole quarantine aspect of it's been it's been a very good time, in the sense that it's given me a lot of headspace, a lot of time to sort of play around and to cultivate a more playful approach to the craft that I do, and to see it as like a blank sort of canvas that you've got possibilities that you can explore. And in terms of making memorable photographs, it obviously helps to have good subject matter, like I sort of discussed before. But another thing which I think is perhaps more memorable, more effective, is to be able to see if you can take perhaps something more mundane and find interesting and fun ways to sort of present it. Obviously, taking advantage of light and shine a new light on it, and to see how you can present subject matter in a new and interesting way. And photography is it's all about or at least away from the commercial space, it's all about how you interpret the world around you, how you use the tools that you have as a photographer to tell a story about what's happening in and around your immediate world and around your surroundings. And I've had to spend a lot of time sort of being at home, and you see a lot of the same things, and you see again, but you can't always, there's always different ways you can see them. There's always different ways and different ways that you can see the world around you, and you can play around. So, for example, this photograph of some flowers that we have in our sort of garden, one of the things that I did was that I used a very, very long focal length telephoto lens, and I was able to I was focused on the flower, but what I did was I saw that the sun was hitting some plants right in front of the flower, in front of the flowers, which would appear sort of defocused, and it would provide a texture to set about into contrast with the flowers. And that idea of sort of shooting some stuff through or that idea of photographing a subject with something behind it, something immediately sort of in front of it, but thrown right out of focus, is one sort of tool that you have. Show you another. Same subject matter, same flower, same group of flowers, but this time I took a different sort of approach, and rather than, I shot this with a telephoto, and rather than going for something very sharp, what I did was that what I decided to do instead was to see if I can play around with the focus placement on the lens and see what sort of effects you would get. Because obviously there is, in my case, I was able to sort of find sort of some areas of definition where the light from the light hitting the petals on the flowers would sometimes sort of become a bit scattered, but it was enough to sort of define the edges of them, but not the actual details within them. And sort of play around just how far you can get stuff out of focus before you sort of lose the idea of there being a sort of defined subject. And with the leaves in the foreground as well, I think I focused it beyond the point of the flowers and further towards infinity, so that I could get the leaves in the foreground even softer. Of course, this was photographed with a massive wide sort of aperture. I think we're at 200mm 2.8 on my full frame D4, which really sort of exaggerated the effect. But you can do this, of course, with you can perhaps do this with lesser cameras as well, and perhaps lenses that perhaps don't open up quite so wide, but you might get different sort of effects. And sometimes, it's not such a good thing to go over depth of field, sometimes it's good to have some sort of definition in the background as such, and not sort of focus on extremes, sort of shallow depth of field all the time. More flowers this time. This time I decided to mess around a bit with using a using a flash, which is using an off-camera flash to freeze the position of the flowers, but while the time moving the camera around so that we could get a bit of blur in the background, and without sort of going into too much detail, there's ways that, depending on how much shutter, how slow you run the shutter on your camera, you can have different sort of levels of definition in the background. So slower shutter speeds will mean that you have a less well-defined background, such as this example that I have here of a similar set of flowers. You can see the blurring and streaking going on. I shot this with a shutter speed of about 1/15 of a second, and moved the camera around fairly sort of quickly. The sharpness, or the apparent sort of sharpness in the details, I think the apparent sharpness in the flowers all come about because of what the flash was doing. And the trick to make this work is you've got to remember the flash itself is a light that will come on, and it will stay on for a very short time, and then it will come off. So it can just freeze subjects in their place. So if you're thinking about it, that's a light that's going on for maybe 1,000th of a second, then it's sort of going off. And when that light goes off, it leaves a sort of impression, if you like, which can sort of combine with the blurred, which sort of combines with the blurs that I put in by moving the camera around to define it in place. Even the blurs to define the to sort of define the streaks, and it's just an interesting sort of technique that I want to show. And got a final one, which was some poppies that I sort of want to show, and I took this from a very, very low point of view. So I was just lying on the grass, again with my telephoto lens set, zoomed right in, and being able to really sort of zoom in and use a very, very large aperture meant that I could really isolate I could really do a good job on isolating the dandelions and the grass. And I sort of set that up by being so low on the ground. I'd be able to have both background and blur, which is some more dandelions, but also a little bit of sort of leading sort of blur in the foreground as well, to sort of help sort of focus and define the subjects right in the define the grass and the dandelions right in the center of the frame. So so what I wanted to sort of get across was just a quick sort of preview, just to show you a couple of ways in which I've managed to make sort of interesting photographs by just playing around, and to see the idea. One of the whole ideas behind my work is one of the things that I pride myself on is to find new ways of discovering new ways of seeing the familiar in a way that is very unfamiliar, and sort of put a smile on people's faces and to make them sort of marvel at new ways and new things. And what I want to say about those of you one final thing I want to say is there's a lot of, like, when you're learning photography, you will have a lot of sort of preconceived notions. So people might talk about rules of thirds, for example, which are all they are is just sort of guidelines to which people have sort of found that sort of thing works. So people think, oh, rule of thirds, that's sort of a useful composition way. It's ironic, this is quite a rule of thirds, but I've never really believed a lot in that sort of thing, because I sort of think that rules are there to be sort of broken, and all they are is just guidelines. They just sort of for what works for the majority of the time. But there's always edge cases, always things where it works to do things that may seem sort of counterintuitive and perhaps very very sort of against what you might think as such. So yeah, that's a few discussions that I've had about a few tips and pointers that I hope has helped you photograph. Hope you sort of indulge your creativity in these strange and uncertain times in lockdown. And the key thing is that I want to get across is it's not so much about what you see as a photographer. You might see the same things, but it's how you see them, how you explore them, that makes all the difference. And finally, if you've got any feedback, then feel free to leave them in comment sections below, or as I said, contact me through my website. If you've got any specific ideas that you want me to talk about, then I'm more than happy to see them. More than happy to help to hear about them. And yeah, so that was me, Marc Francois. So till next time, I shall see you soon.